Thank you very much, Jeremy. First of all, I would like to apologize to our Proimmune team that I can't really share any of the work we're doing together. So I picked a different topic, and because I saw the program and we were going to talk about very similar things, I decided to pick one particular subject within the immunogenicity risk assessment strategies that we all have. And so you're familiar with this cartoon. We all have a very different version of it, but all very similar, the way you see it. So within these different steps that we are trying to assess in terms of risk for ADA development, I decided to focus on the right part of this diagram, so on the B-cell activation and differentiation. So I'm going to be tiptoeing here, and I thought that I would take advantage of the fact that we have very interactive meeting and lots of experts in the room, so we can throw ideas and discuss. So can we assess, predict, and maybe modify B-cell epitopes? So let's start with the B-cell epitope prediction. So similarly to what we do when we look at T-cell epitopes, we start with trying to define them, predict them in silico. So I had a look at what was published in terms of the in silico prediction algorithm for B-cell epitopes. And so this is in this table, you have a list of different algorithms. They are mainly based, they take into account multiple variables that include the hydrophilicity, the solvent accessibility, structure flexibility, and so on. And apparently they can be separated in two big buckets, the sequence-based and the structure-based algorithm. And this table was taken from a paper published last year by Dalkas and colleagues, and they describe SEPIA algorithm, which it's shown in this table, actually had the highest AUC. So this is just to illustrate the case study that they describe in their paper. So this is, they applied their algorithm to the human beta-2 adrenergic G protein coupled receptor. And so you can see in green the predicted epitopes, in red the observed epitopes, and then in blue the one that were both predicted and observed. And in that particular case, so they had 4 true epitopes predicted correctly, 272 true non-epitopes, and together 8 false positive, 28 false negative epitopes. So altogether, they had an AUC of 0.77. So I think it would be nice to see what that would look like for monoclonal antibodies. So B-cell epitope analysis and identification. So moving on more experimental side of things. So let's start with this work conducted by Vanchi and colleagues and published in 2014. So the team was looking at trying to analyze the ADA response to these different TNF-alpha antibodies. And the idea was to try and decipher the region that would be recognized by these antibodies. And they work with humanized, so adalimumab, golimumab, and then chimeric antibody infliximab and go back. So the fully human antibodies, adalimumab, golimumab, humanized atezolizumab, and infliximab. So they were working with the serum from patients that have been treated with these different biologics, and they did some, they have TNF competition assay to look at the capacity of these different serum to inhibit binding to the drug. So in other terms, would that the ADAs recognize the same epitope on the drug that the TNF? So they could show that more than 90% of ADA were actually neutralizing and directed to the paratope of the drug. And this was true for infliximab, the chimeric antibody, but it was true for the fully human antibodies as well. So there is this other piece of work looking at adalimumab. And in this case, Van Schuvenberg and colleagues derived clones from the B-cell precursors isolated from patients treated with adalimumab, and that were ADA positive. And again, they look at the capacity of these clones to recognize different version of adalimumab. So they've got, sorry. Yeah, so they set up this Fab inhibitor competition assay, where they actually made a library of Fab with different point mutation. So here, and they looked at the capacity of the clones to bind the different variants. So really looking precisely at what regions were bound when they bind the adalimumab. So this is an example for the clone 2.8 here, and so the complete inhibition by the wild type, and then you see that the clone recognized the variants with the different, the competition is different for the different variants, and this table summarizes the work for all the clones. So in fact, they could demonstrate that the ADAs induced by adalimumab are neutralizing, and they directed to different distinct but overlapping region still in the paratope of the drug. So now still looking at infliximab, then this work was conducted to actually precisely define the epitopes, and it was carried out using a peptide microarray assay. Looking at serum from infliximab-treated patients versus untreated controls. And so the peptide microarray assay was composed of 15 MERs covering the whole sequence of the drug, so not only the variable sequence, but also the constant region. And so what you can see here is that so they have identified different peptides that were recognized by the serum, so in the variable region and then in the constant region. And maybe I should mention here that in fact in the previous work in here was observed that the inhibition was not complete here for infliximab. And actually, the authors here went to look what the ADAs would recognize, because the suspicion was that because it's a chimeric antibody, then some ADAs will recognize the mouse parts of the antibody, and in fact there was no inhibition by an IgG mouse serum. So they concluded that probably the ADAs will recognize the constant region of infliximab. And so that's what we could maybe find here. Some epitopes have been identified, but in this work, actually, the authors went to look at the recognition of the constant region during looking at the recognition of different rheumatoid factors, and they concluded that they had no recognition. So they thought they had identified maybe linear epitopes that would not be actually recognized in a conformation way by ADAs. The other interesting piece here as well is to see that in untreated controls, they could detect some recognition of some peptides. So they went back and they compared actually the strengths of the recognition, and even though there is recognition here of this peptide by the non-untreated controls, the recognition was much less strong, and the affinity of the antibodies was much lower than in treated patients. So with this assay, they identified 6 infliximab B-cell epitopes, one in CDRH1, one in CDRH3, one which is adjacent to CDRL2, and which actually was the one that gave the strongest signal here, one in CDRL3, and 2 in the constant region. So infliximab B-cell epitope, again, so this work was published this year, and the authors in this piece of work were really interested to compare the antigenicity of infliximab and the biosimilar CTP13. So they started by looking at the cross-reactivity of the different ADAs induced in IBD patients treated with infliximab and ADAs induced in patients treated with the biosimilar. So they did a lot of experiments looking at the cross-reactivity, cross-competition, and really they concluded that the ADA directed against the biosimilar and the originator cross-reacted and exhibited the same pattern of recognition. It was very similar. And then they went to do this peptide phage ELISA to identify more precisely the epitopes. There was no main difference between the two sets of patients, the one treated with infliximab and treated with the biosimilar. And with that method, they identified 13 B-cell epitopes, 6 in VH, 4 in VL, and 3 in CH. So at that point, if you've been looking a lot at T-cell epitopes, you start wondering if they cluster, if the B and T-cell cluster, especially if you have in mind some deimmunization process. So this work was mentioned a few times already during this meeting. Is the work by Hamze et al. In Bernard Mayer's lab, where they looked at they identified the T-cell epitope, CD4 T-cell epitope from infliximab and rituximab. Here I'm showing only the result for infliximab, and they actually used a suite of assays that we know well, so in silico prediction and then in vitro binding of the peptides, and the MAPS assay, and then the T-cell assay to look at the T-cell repertoire. So if we start here so this is the sequence, so the heavy chain and the light chain for infliximab, and here you've got the clustering, I mean the cluster of the epitopes that have been identified by MAPS, and these are the cluster identified using healthy donors. And this was mentioned a few times as well, that we always question the relevance of doing all our predictive assay using healthy donors. And this was, I think, a major piece of work starting to demonstrate that actually what we identify using healthy donors can be confirmed using cells that are derived from patients. So these are the epitopes that are identified using T cells, cells from patients. And just to mention here that we discussed that already, the MAPS assay can be also over predictive. You can have peptides are presented, but they don't have a T cell repertoire. So just to say that this illustrates, I think, nicely that we need to go all the way and look at all the different assays and put the results together and narrow down which are really the T-cell epitopes. So the main message here, so again, 4 out of the 9 T-cell epitope clusters, they overlap with CDR regions. 8 out of 9 peptides identified. In healthy donors, recall T-cell responses in ADA-positive patients. So this is my very crude analysis of the B cell and the D cell and the T cell epitope. I took the table, the 15 males that were tested by Mayer's group here, So in green, we have the epitopes that have been identified. So this is VHVL. And I tried to look at what sequences were identified in terms of B-cell epitope by the two other groups, the work I just described. So it's not, this is not very precise. I really apologize, but sometimes difficult because these are overlapping peptides. So if you find one that is a bit similar, you don't know exactly where to put it. But the idea was to see if there was any clustering at all, if they were very far apart or not. And it looks like the B cells, so in blue and in yellow, seem to cluster with the T cell. It looks like they're not very far apart. So this was to see when we think about the immunization and going back to the MutaMap assay that Jeremy talked this morning about. We see now that with the clustering of the B cell and the T cell epitope, it might be really useful to have some high throughput assay that can determine what we do when we start modifying the T cell epitope and B cell epitope. And this is another example of clustering of the T and B cell epitopes, and this is from Patin's groups. It is Mazur and colleagues who worked with the immunotoxins, and so they started with identifying the B cell epitope, the B cell epitope here, and they mutated. They did some deimmunization, but the molecule was still immunogenic, so they went back and they start removing the T cell epitope. So ended up with a protein that was a biologic that was deimmunized for both T cell and B cells. And again, if you look at the sequence, and so you've got a T cell mutation, B cell in different colors here, they cluster again. So the good news is that their new de-risk protein had, decreased in vitro T cell proliferation responses. They remain active. Then now here, this little phrase here is that abrogating a B cell epitope created, in their case, a new T cell epitope. So again, integrative approaches for T cell and B cell might be useful. So. In summary, so we've got algorithm now that designed for B-cell linear conformation epitope prediction. We might need to acquire more data to have to gain real confidence in the prediction. And the current method of B-cell epitope identification, we've seen they're mainly based on the use of serum ADA positive human serum, ADA derived from treated patient B-cell precursors. Hence, it looks like this kind of epitope identification might be limited to the stage of development where we do have access to these samples. Then the overlap of the B-cell and the T-cell epitope we observed for some therapeutic protein drugs. I gave you two examples I discussed yesterday with Zubin and asked him if he knew about this kind of alignment and comparison for factor 8, factor 7. And he said he hasn't seen a comparison yet. So this demonstrates the complexity of mitigating immunogenicity at the protein design stage where we try to deimmunize. So this is where I hope I get your input. So looking forward, as this was briefly mentioned as well, could we generate human ADAs earlier during development to be able to deimmunize lead candidates through the identification of the B-cell epitopes? So could we use humanized mice or 3D matrix system like the MIMIC, the artificial lymph nodes? Then another question here is about the MHC class 2 restricted epitopes, because I've noticed that we all talk about the epitopes that are presented by dendritic cells. So we're looking at the epitopes that will induce the T cell response, but we kind of maybe sometimes overlook this interaction here, that the B cell also has to present that MHC class 2 epitope to actually have this cognate interaction. So, sorry. So I was wondering if the T cell epitope that the MHC class 2 epitope that we identified, they're the same. Would they be the same peptide presented by B cells? I actually went back and I looked at the Alex Sete's publication in 2017, where we said, well, what have we learned with all the peptides that we have identified now? And I was really surprised to find out that 45% of the data that they generated were produced using B cells as antigen-presenting cells and not DCs. So when you use their algorithm of prediction, it was set up and fed by data generated using B cells. So I was like, okay, we use we look at DCs, there's B cells. Okay, so this is one question. Then this was mentioned again this morning, what cytokines are produced by the CD4 T cells, because it looks like, for many reasons, we look at proliferation and we do not go and look at what these T cells produce. And there's some emerging data, especially from the Iberis Consortium, that have described maybe in some IL-10 secretion in patients not developing ADAs. So what's the outcome, depending on what our CD4 T cells secrete. And then the last bit would be, what is the contribution of the T cell independent pathway to ADA development of persistent? I think there is some controversy about the aggregates being able to really trigger a T cell independent response, so a B cell activation directly. And what is the contribution to ADA? So these are few questions. So I would like to thank the Immunogenicity Sciences Group of Pfizer. Tim Hickling is our lead, and Chris Lepsey is the head of the Bionautical, so PKPD Immunogenicity. And I would like to mention the European Immunogenicity Platform. We have our 10th Open Symposium on Immunogenicity of Biopharmaceuticals in Lisbon in February. And we also have a non-clinical immunogenicity risk assessment working group. We'll discuss all these issues that we have. And so if you're interested, contact me and see if you can join. It's an association, and the members are company members. Thank you very much.
So I like the data on the patient samples versus the non-patient samples, and but I don't know if it's true for infliximab, but definitely for Humira, where the ADA rate in patients or RA patients is much higher than in healthy volunteers. Is that the same way? Is that the same for infliximab? And then how do we deal with the in vitro data being different?
Sorry, I'm not sure.
So I think for a lot of the anti-TNF antibodies, the anti-drug antibody rate in the clinic is fairly high, and we don't see that in the healthy volunteer studies. But you show with your I think it was the MAPS data, right?
Yeah, it was MAPS and T cell.
The same rate?
Yeah.
Or they show the same peptides being presented. I guess peptides doesn't mean anti-drug antibodies.
Yeah, I think that's where we have to be really cautious when we use all our suite of assays. That we're really obsessed by trying to find correlations and direct correlation. We just pick one assay. Oh yeah, it works really well. But yes, I think as we accumulate more and more data, and with all of the assays and all the teams and across companies, we'll learn more and be able to make this correlation. But yeah, it's still difficult to do that now.
I have a question. Looking at B-cell epitope prediction, I'm wondering, how do you deal with immune dominance? Because we know B-cells compete with each other. So if you identify 3 epitopes, 3 B-cell epitopes, most likely just one of them is going to be the predominant immune response. And how do algorithms towards B-cell epitopes address that?
I'm afraid I'm not able to answer that question about the algorithm and how they are really set.
Right, no, I'm just
but
wondering, how do you deal with immune tolerance? Do you look at affinity, like can you calculate like a predicted affinity, and you say like higher affinity are most likely to do?
yeah. Mm, maybe a way to assess this immunodominance of the B-cell epitope would be to look at a lot of different clones that you can derive, and then see whether you've got predominant recognition, predominant epitope. Maybe it is not the case that we have enough data yet to do that, but it might be for infliximab. At least we've got now 2 studies. So accumulating this identification and comparing also you might have a difference with the different disease. So you might find out that if you work with the serum from IBD patient versus serum from RA patient, you might find there is a different immunodominance in terms of B-cell epitope as well.
So one of your questions, Sophie, was about the difference between antigen presentation of B cells versus
Yes.
T.
That was for you.
Okay, yeah, well, I thought about it. But, I mean, we don't know the answer to that, but it's certainly very, very interesting, one that could quite easily experimentally be achieved. It's a matter of just looking at
Yep.
see. But yeah, I think it's an interesting point.
Yeah, I think a potential complicating factor there is, you've mentioned that the ELCLs have been used perhaps for getting some of that data together for some of the predictive algorithms, but that's still based on sort of self-peptide presentation rather than drug peptide presentation, when for drug peptide presentation maybe the main uptake mechanism in a clinical setting would be actually through the BCR.
Yeah.
So unless you have, so that would be difficult to implement in healthy volunteers. Ultimately, it's an interesting question. So
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd also like
That's
to
a good
chime in
point.
with regards to this. You're going to be seeing, well, it depends on what sort of antigen processing is going on within the B cells compared to the dendritic cells. Even within different APC populations located in different regions of the body, they might be expressing different proteasome subunits, which changes the profile
Absolutely.
of peptides that emerge.
Yeah, absolutely.
So if you look at the B cells and say they're all expressing the same proteasome as that of the dendritic cells, you might predict to see the same peptides that emerge, whereas if you look at for something like a antigen-presenting cell in the thymus that expresses entirely unique proteasomes to produce entirely unique self-peptides for presentation to developing thymocytes, it's going to be different. So it all depends, I guess, on what these B cells are expressing, in what context and the certain particular environment which you'll see. That's at least what I think. So.
Yeah, I think we all know the limitations of the assay that we run, and we know that we all use, I think, and what my understanding, we all use monocyte-derived dendritic cells as our APCs, favorite APCs, and we know the limitation.
So you said there is a 45% match between the peptide presented by the B cell as well as the DCs. Did they use the MAP technology that what you have been used to identify the peptide, or did they find out the match is?
Oh no,
45%?
sorry, I probably got lost in translation there. What I was trying to say is that the data set that has fed the algorithm for the prediction of the MHC class 2 binding, the experimental data comes more from B cells than DCs. I've got the figures. That's going to help me. Is this one? So 45% of the elution studies were conducted by B cells. If you look here.
Okay.
So I thought that was an interesting point. Actually, that's a good point. I would say it was for both. Yeah.
Well, I think we'll
Thank you.